Well, today we are on the topic, Let Jesus Teach You to Pray, and we are going to look very quickly at a number of things that Jesus did and taught. So we're going to look at both what Jesus modeled, how he showed the disciples by his own example, as well as what he taught, what he told people to do. We'll start with what he modeled. And one of the things as you read through the Gospels, especially Luke, but all of the Gospels report that Jesus frequently left everyone behind and went off by himself to pray. He would pray in public a lot, out loud, so that people could hear what praying looked like, what it sounded like. But that wasn't enough. So while he always prayed while there were people around, he also would by himself go off and pray. So he prayed at his baptism, he prayed at the Transfiguration, he prayed at many significant parts in his life. And the Gospel of Luke says not only just generally that he went out to pray, but it gives us several examples. One of the times in Matthew is in Matthew 14. Jesus went up the mountain by himself to pray. He had wanted to go earlier. He heard that his friend of his had been murdered. But then the crowd showed up. And he had compassion on them and helped them all day long. But when the day ended, he sent his disciples away and he sent the crowd away, and he still got off by himself. There are times when you really need to take some time because of the circumstances of life. You find yourself in a spot, you've just got to get away. And sometimes, right when you think, I've got to get away, the family shows up with potluck items and suddenly your house is full and you can't. So, that's good to have that time. But when it's done, don't give up on your time to go and be just with God. So one of the things that Jesus modeled is being alone with God one-on-one. Second thing that Jesus modeled, Matthew 19. Little children were being brought so that Jesus might lay his hands on them and pray. So the people are starting to bring their kids to Jesus because they want a blessing for their kids. They want their kids' lives to be great. And they believe that if Jesus, a holy man of God, touches them and blesses them, that it will be good for their kids. So they're bringing their kids, and the disciples say, "Stop." I don't know if you would say that or not. If we started having tons of people coming in with their kids in the middle, interrupting things, I want my kid to be prayed for. I'm guessing that some of you would say, I can do that. And others would say, come back next week. This isn't the time. I don't know. But that's what his disciples said. His disciples said, there's no good time. Stop bugging the teacher. But Jesus was compassionate for people where they were. Anytime someone came to him with a need, often the need was outside Jesus' mission even, and Jesus responded to the person tugging on his sleeve, tugging on his heart. In this case, Jesus prayed for the kids and blessed them. And he said that it's good to do that. So I take that not just for kids. It's good to bless kids in general, but anyone. It's good to bless people. Third example. Matthew 21, Jesus came into a place like this and wanted this place to be focused on prayer. When he entered the temple at that time was not focused on prayer. It looked more like a marketplace. And Jesus overturned the people doing business, commerce, said the temple area is an area for prayer. And quoted Isaiah, verse we looked at a couple weeks ago, that the spot where God's presence is a place for all the nations to be in prayer and worship of God, where all the nations are welcome. One part of Jesus demonstrating what prayer is like, you may not guess is a prayer at first. But Jesus says it is, and it's a demonstration of how he prayed most frequently with regards to healing. So we'll take a look at the fig tree example from Matthew 21. Seeing a fig tree, Jesus went to it and found nothing but leaves. Well, the point of a fig tree is to get figs, right? If you want leaves, you don't need a fig tree. But this particular fig tree had no fruit. Jesus said, "May no fruit ever come from you again." The fig tree was not producing. It was taking up soil. It was robbing people of what they needed. Because there could have been a fig tree in its place producing, but it was taking up the space. A lot of times you'll find that. You'll find that there is something taking up the space, taking up resources, but not producing what it's intended. When Jesus comes to this fig tree, he says, "May no fruit ever come from you again." And in Matthew, the fig tree withered at once. The disciples were a little amazed at this, and Jesus told them, this is what prayer is like. If you have faith and don't doubt, whatever you ask in prayer with faith, you will receive. So, it may not have sounded like a prayer to you, because it wasn't on the order of, "God, please don't let this fig tree ever produce fruit again." It was just a command to the fig tree. But Jesus' prayers were often like that. Jesus, when he was praying, would tell a person what to do or a condition what to do, and that was in his view a prayer. Whatever you ask for in prayer with faith, you will receive. Every time I encounter this verse, it reminds me, I need to have more faith and less whining in my prayers. One of the speakers that I heard at Continuing Ed this year was talking about how he had a child who was just whining, begging for something that he was predisposed to give. And he finally asked the child, "How would you ask me if you knew that I loved you?" It's clear from your tone that you don't, he didn't say what I'm about to say, but it's clear from your tone that you don't think I care for you at all. That you think you have to, that I'm ungrateful, ungracious, that I have very few resources and I'm stingy with them. And you have to just beg and beg and beg and beg, or you won't possibly get what you need. It's very clear that's how you're acting. And are we praying like that? Are we praying from a state of anxiety that has no reflection on God's mercy and love, tenderness towards us, graciousness towards us, and ability? Whatever you ask for in prayer with faith, you will receive. So this verse helps confront me, and I need from time to time to check the tone of my prayers. Jesus, when he was praying, said in the Gethsemane, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, but not what I want, but what you want." So as he was about to be crucified, he asks God, if there's any other way, I really don't want to go through this suffering, but I want what you want. So what Jesus modeled, summary, he modeled frequent prayer. He modeled prayer in public and in private. He modeled prayer for others and for himself. And he modeled telling conditions and people what to do. He modeled requesting and then submitting to God. So what did he teach? What did he tell the disciples and the people who were coming to see him? What did he tell them? This is how you should pray. He taught several things. In Luke, he told a parable about how people should not lose heart. They should keep praying. There are times when I'm just not sure how this works. Because there are times when I think you prayed it once, God heard you, God's merciful, that's in line with God's will, leave it. You planted the seed. And there are times when it's worth just holding, God, I know you're faithful. I just am holding this person before you. And the Bible seems to say sometimes that probably both are okay in different situations. But there are times when it's worth continuing to pray for something and not losing heart. Outside in our garden, there are a number of sunflowers that started with one seed. And there are patches that have got sunflower seeds in that soil like you wouldn't believe, and not one of them has decided to sprout yet. I'm probably going to move on to watermelon or something. So you can, as you're continuing to intercede, you can change your tactic somehow. You can change how, continue to hold before God what it is that you're hoping for, but maybe you want to try something different while you're continuing to not lose heart. Jesus taught people to pray for themselves when they were in desperate situations. When people are in the end times, Jesus said when the temple, or when the a particular condition. This particular example is possibly applied to the destruction of the temple in Jesus, right after Jesus' day, so about 70 AD, or it may apply coming up in the end times. Usually what happens when there's something prophetic is it applies at the initial time of the prophecy, and then it's like a skipping stone. It applies at a later point in history, and it applies again at a point in history. I think you'll find that there are times when the church is under attack or individuals are under attack. And in those situations, it's worth looking at times when Jesus' disciples were having a difficult time, when they were being tortured or tormented, or when they were facing conditions that were unfavorable. What did Jesus say about that, those times? How did they react? In one of, talking about one of those times, Jesus said, pray that your flight is not in winter or on a Sabbath. He was talking about an event coming up that was going to be bad. If it happened in winter, it would be especially desperate, because people would be fleeing in the snow, in the cold. They would be freezing to death, when if it was in the summer, they wouldn't be freezing to death. So there are some things that are going to happen, but the timing is in flux, or how it comes about is in flux. You can pray into those situations, and you can pray for yourself on things that matter. He also taught us to pray for others, and not just any others. Jesus said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So it may come easy, natural for you to pray for yourself. Jesus said also, the people that are hurting you, pray for them. So how do you pray for them? You might imagine someone praying for them. I pray that they be destroyed. Well, that's not what Jesus was talking about. Pray for people who persecute you, for them to be blessed. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father who's in heaven. In fact, you are adopted kids of God. So it's worth acting like it. Because God lets the rain fall on the just and the unjust. God gives everybody the same. You should too. Then in Matthew, Jesus gives some teaching on how to pray. About 3 examples. Hypocrites love to pray so they can be seen by others. Don't be like that. When you pray, don't do it to show off. You're talking to God, you're not trying to get favor among people. If you're trying to get favor among people and just show off, that's all the reward you get. But talk to God, who can give you a far better reward than that. Whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door. Now, did Jesus do this all the time? No. He did go off by himself a lot and pray, but he also prayed in public. So the point isn't that you can only you should never pray out loud in the church because you should only be praying at home in your closet. No, that's not the point. The point is, wherever you're praying, don't do it to show off. Gentiles think they will be heard because there are many words. Don't be like that. Your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. So it's like this. Imagine a parent has been home all day with a kid. At the end of the day, the parent says, "Come sit with me. Come sit on my lap. Tell me, what happened today?" The parent doesn't need information. The parent's just trying for a relationship. What is it that mattered to you? What did you notice? What do you care about? Come sit with me for a while. That's the kind of relationship God wants with you. You don't have to tell God all the details because God knows them. But God does still want to hear from you and to hear your voice. Then Jesus said, here's a model prayer. Here's how to pray. Our Father in heaven. You have a dad. You have also God who is as close to you as an earthly dad. It's just in heaven. Our Father in heaven, hallowed, that is holy, be your name. Let your name be holy, separate, set aside, sacred. If you do any construction work, you know that this isn't always happening in America. It's not just construction. Perhaps it happens at your house. But let God's name be holy. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth just like it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. So you can get what you need from day to day by God's provision. It's worth asking for. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. You may notice this kind of hinge in this statement. If you haven't forgiven your debtors, Jesus says, you don't get forgiven. By you not forgiving others, it prevents you from receiving God's mercy and forgiveness. So forgive others. Forgive us our debts as we now, here and now, forgive everyone. And don't bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. We do a survey every now and then about how often do you pray this prayer, and I'm stunned when people tell me, once a month, maybe once a year, aside from worship. They must have figured out a way to be far more holy than me, and I really need for them to give me some lessons, because I couldn't make it without this prayer. And I just don't know how people think they can make it without asking for God's daily provision and then asking for God's protection from evil. Do not bring us to the time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. Then Jesus gave some counsel. If you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you don't, your heavenly Father won't forgive you your trespasses. So in summary, what did Jesus model? He modeled frequent prayer in public and in private, prayer for others and for himself, telling conditions and people what to do, and requesting and then submitting to God for God's answer. What did he teach? He taught that we should pray for everyone, for yourself, for your enemies, and everybody in between. We don't pray to impress others, and don't be long-winded. If you're long-winded by nature, I guess God will just expect you to be long-winded because that's your nature. But there's no need to do it to show off or to try to get God's favor. Don't lose heart. What connects you most with God in prayer is your emotional state. And then Jesus gave us this model for prayer, which I recommend to you on a daily basis or more frequent than that. We're going to take a moment for prayer. This first part, each of you can pray whatever you like in the silence. God, thanks that you like to be in relationship with us and you like to hear from us. You like to hear us pray. Thanks that you listen. And thank you that you're so full of love for us. So we can trust you that as we bring anything to you, we know that you answer out of your great love. We thank you and we praise you. Amen.